Okay, Professor Gabriel Barkay, one of Israel's most senior archaeologists. Barkay was a lecturer at Bar Ilan University, Tel Aviv University, and the Jerusalem University College on Mount Zion. In 1996, Barkay received the Jerusalem Prize for his life work as an archaeologist in Jerusalem. In 2014, he received the Moscovitz Prize for Zionism. His academic area of interest includes the archaeology of Jerusalem, biblical archaeology, burial and burial customs, art, epigraphy, glyptics of the Iron Age, and more and more. Barkay dug at Siluan, necropolis, tomb at Katef Hinoms, where we're situated right now, and other many key points in Jerusalem. In 2005, together with archaeologist Zachi Dvira, Barkay established the Temple Mount Sifting project. Zachi Dvira, if I may. 2004 already? Okay, fantastic. Sorry for... Co-director of the Temple Mount Sifting project, and was the first person to recognize the archaeological importance of the debris removed from the Temple Mount since 2004. Okay, Dvira is one of the directing and co-directing the Sifting project, as well as publishing the finds from the projects. With them and delivering this lecture will be Frankie Snyder, who is an independent researcher who lives in Jerusalem for 14 years. She has committed her lifelong love for rocks and keen sense of geometry to land a niche, a career analyzing the ornated Opus Sectile floors created from the polished multicolored stone tiles cut in variety of geometric shapes that are found in Israel in King Herod's palaces and on the Temple Mount, and in Byzantine and Crusader churches, and I believe this is what she'll be presenting to us today. Thank you very much. 15 minutes.
Do you have the... No, there was a clicker here a minute ago. No, there it is. No.
No, this one is.
This is the one.
So check if it works.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, we tried it before. The title of my lecture is "The Stones That the Salvagers Rejected: Commercial Salvaging of Herodian Opus Sectile Tiles and Its Impact on Reconstructing the Temple Mount Floor Patterns." King Herod the Great introduced the Opus Sectile craft to the Levant for the use in his palaces and on the Temple Mount. And you'll see the various palaces here. We'll start at the bottom and go up. Masada, Machaerus, Herodium. In Jerusalem, there is a palace that does have tiles, but it hasn't been excavated yet. Also, the Temple Mount, the palaces at Kypros and Jericho, Caesarea, and Banyas. At Tiberia, we have a floor that we believe is an Opus Sectile floor from the palace of Herod's son, Herod Antipas. At the Temple Mount Sifting Project, we have over 600 Opus Sectile tiles and fragments, but two main questions that stood in front of us. Okay, the two main questions that we had were, which of these are Herodian? And second, how do we reconstruct the original patterns? For the first, which are Herodian? First of all, unlike pottery and coins, there are no textbooks that give you answers to these questions. So I decided the best thing to do was to visit the palaces, look, photograph, measure the tiles and the impressions, try to identify all the different materials that King Herod was using. Second, we hauled out crates and boxes of tiles from over 50 years of past excavations at Herod's palaces. Again, I looked at them, photographed, measured, identified the materials. And I want to give a big thank you to all the archaeologists who dragged boxes out of storage. Second question was, how do we reconstruct the original patterns? The quick answer to that one is, you're a mathematician, figure it out. Okay, first thing we're going to do is take a quick tour of 4 of Herod's palaces and see what we can learn about Herod's Opus Sectile floors by visiting these places. The first one is the Northern Palace at Masada. And what we want to look at is, let me see if I can get the cursor going. There it is. We want to look at the bathhouse that's up here on the upper level. In the bathhouse, 3 floors were paved with Opus Sectile tiles. Two of them had the same pattern. It's called a Q2, or a square within a square pattern, where a small square it appears to be placed inside of a large square. The tepidarium used this pattern in small standard tiles, and the caldarium used large standard tiles. They were all black bitumen and pink limestone. Now, what do I mean by standard tiles? In Roman palaces, in Roman buildings, in Roman villas, you find that the tiles came based on the Roman foot. The most standard tile was a square, one Roman foot on each side. Then there's a smaller square. It is about 2.9 centimeters on the side. It is one Roman foot on its diagonal. This small square fits very nicely inside the large one to create the Q2 pattern. Other standard tiles are each of these squares cut in half on a diagonal to form isosceles right triangles, and ones that are split into 4 triangles. In the caldarium, we use the large square and the large set of triangles. In the tepidarium, they use the small square and the small set of triangles. The third room was paved totally differently. It's paved in an alternating triangles pattern. Again, it was local black bitumen and local pink limestone, but it was something very different than those other floors. The Romans used an alternating triangles pattern, but what they used were what we consider to be standard tiles that were all equilateral triangles, 360 degrees, three sides that were the same. In Herod's floors, he used these non-standard isosceles triangles, which I have given the name Herod's triangles. Herod's triangles, or Mishalah Shel Hordus, is a triangle that has the same length for its base and its height. It's like a triangle reconstructed inside of a square. It has the rather strange corner measurements of around 52, 64, and 64 degrees. This shaped triangle is rarely used in popular Roman floors. It's frequently seen in Herod's floors. It is used to cover a very large floor, just with, like you saw before, with the tiles, just using these tiles for an entire floor. Other times, this shaped triangle is used within a more complex pattern, and sometimes the shape itself is used to generate patterns. For the Romans, this was a non-standard shape. For Herod, this was his favorite shape. So back to our bathhouse. The tepidarium and the caldarium used standard size Roman tiles. All the tiles were salvaged. There's a total of 1 triangle left in these 2 rooms total, that's it. The apoditarium, on the other hand, used non-standard tiles. There are over 100 of these left sitting in the room. These are the stones that the salvagers rejected. So from Masada, we learned that looters take whatever they can get their hands on, but salvagers take what they know they can resell, because commercial salvaging was a lucrative business. Salvagers preferred the standard size Roman tiles. They usually rejected the non-standard ones. We also learned in here how Herod's triangles could be used to cover an entire floor. Now we'll go to Herodian, and we want to visit the upper palace. Here we go, we're gonna go to the upper palace here. And there we want to look at Herod's triclinium that had originally, that was eventually turned into a synagogue by the Jewish rebels. In this particular room, the triclinium was paved only with standard size Roman tiles. Both the larger tiles here in the center, I'm trying to find my cursor again, can't find it. Okay, the larger tiles in the center, and then out around the edge, some of the smaller standard tiles. But every single tile was salvaged. Why? Well, the tile impressions indicate that the entire room was paved with imported ancient marble tiles. Now, how do we know that from looking at this picture right here? And I remember having the conversation with Roy Barat and Jakob Kalman going, Roy, look at this, it's all marble. He's going, what? I'm going, there's a hint here. Local limestone and bitumen tiles have a peaked back. They leave a deep impression in the floor. The imported tiles have a flat back. They leave flat impressions in the plaster. And this is how we know this room was paved totally with imported tiles. Now, a few fragments were left behind. These are the ones that the salvagers rejected, but these different fragments give us an idea of the varieties of stones that King Herod was importing. So from Herodian, we learned that Tiles of imported marbles, especially standard size tiles, were very highly prized by salvagers, but they rejected tile fragments. But even when tiles are absent, you can tell if the floors have originally been made out of local materials or imported materials by the impressions that were left in the plaster. Third stop, the palatial fortress at Kypros. This is on the ridge line above Jericho. Here again, we're going into the bathhouse to the caldarium. This is the one that was paved with Opus Sectile tiles. In this room, all the tiles were imported marble. They all left flat back impressions. Most of the tiles in the room were salvaged. However, the tiles in the central emblema were rejected. Why? Especially because they're all imported marble. Here's why. The outer part of the room was paved with standard 1 Roman foot square tiles. They're gone. Inside the emblema, these tiles are non-standard size. Why? The tiles were shrunk in order to accommodate that little gray border trim that you see going around the emblema. In order to keep the pattern, keep the integrity of the pattern, they had to shrink the module. So all these tiles inside that gray square are all non-standard tiles. And even though they were non-standard, you would have thought they would have taken them. So here's some of the varieties that we have left. Almost all of these are complete tiles, but they were left behind because they were the wrong size. These were the ones the salvagers rejected. So from Kypros that we learned that if they put a border trim, which was a standard 1/8 Roman foot wide trim around a group of tiles, it caused the tiles within the border to be smaller than normal, and they were rejected. Non-standard tiles of ancient marbles, if there's only a few of them, there will be one exception. If there's only a few of them, they're going to be rejected by the salvagers. Herod's third palace in Jericho. You're looking at the triclinium, and this is the room we want to focus on. This room had 3 different tile patterns. Around the very outside edge was a chessboard pattern made of regular sized tiles. They're those smaller square tiles, the ones that are 20.9 centimeters across. Then after that, there is a pattern that uses, see if I find my cursor, can't find it, okay. That uses what's called a Q2 in a lattice pattern. But the one that is really, really interesting is this really complicated pattern that you see enlarged down here at the bottom. I looked at this pattern for a couple of years going, this is really neat. How does somebody make this up? How was the pattern generated? And one day as I was sitting there staring at it, it jumped out at me. This is the case where Herod used Herod's triangles to generate a pattern. Watch what we do here. If you take 4 Herod's triangles and put them one on top of the other, point one up, point one down, point one left, point one right, you get this really neat kind of a starburst pattern here. Put a square in the middle of the pattern, connecting some of those intersections. And then the 4 triangles, the ones going up, down, left, and right, are small Herod's triangles. It turns out that this motif with a 4-pointed star using 4 Herod's triangles was the only thing that Herod used to generate the floor pattern. Now, when I say Herod did this, I'm talking about his mason did this, but Herod wanted something unique and he got it. Okay, so here's the motif that you're looking at. Can you see how the pattern was generated using only that pattern? Now you can see some little stars in there. Okay, got the cursor going. You can see some small squares, small 4-pointed stars in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a color pattern for you. You can see the small green 4-pointed stars, but now look at across the center at a large blue star. It overlaps a large red star, which overlaps a large blue star and overlaps a large red star. And above it, back to blue stars and red stars. So the only thing that was used to generate this pattern was this one motif that uses 4 Herod's triangles around a central square. Absolutely ingenious. In this particular pattern, the Herod's triangles are all black bitumen, non-standard shape. All the squares and the rhombi were all imported marble. Again, non-standard sizes. However, because there were so many of each one, and we're talking about in the thousands because there were over 25,000 tiles used in this floor, it was worth taking them and salvaging them all. So the only thing that we have left at Jericho are a bunch of little broken pieces, but even with that, we can identify the materials that were being used. These were the stones that the salvagers rejected. So from Jericho, we learned that Herod's triangles were used as smaller tiles within complex floor patterns. And we see how Herod's triangles were used to generate floor patterns. And we also see that non-standard tiles, if there were enough of them, they were salvaged. The next thing I did was make a table of all these different kind of marbles. I wasn't reading them all for you. All the different kind of marbles are listed there on the right. And then across the top, we have all the different Herodian palaces. An X means a tile was found there out of that material. An O is some kind of an object. Usually it was either a stone vessel or a table. Then I looked at the Temple Mount and looked at the stones that were made out of this specific list of materials. And I can guarantee you with about 99% certainty, they are Herodian. Why? Because after the Herodian period, once we get into late Roman and especially into Byzantine, these colorful stones, especially all these braches, most of these are braches here, or you say brexia, it's Italian, breccia, okay. These were no longer imported. We don't see them. Most of the quarries were closed out. So if I find them on the Temple Mount, there is a really, really good chance this is a Herodian tile. So taking all this information that we learned from the Herodian palaces, let's go back and apply it to the Temple Mount. First, let's start by finding a Herod's triangle. I've got one of those. It was out of black bitumen, 1/3 Roman foot high, 1/3 Roman foot wide. Remember that Jericho 4-pointed star? If I create a pattern using that tile, which is 1/3 Roman foot high, that upper triangle is 1/3 Roman foot, the middle square is 1/3 Roman foot, the lower part is 1/3 Roman foot, and I have this lovely 1 Roman foot square pattern. And among the Roman popular patterns, this was the most popular way to insert a 4-pointed star, usually not a Herod's triangle one, but to insert a 4-pointed star into a pattern was to put it inside of the Q2 pattern. Okay, find some more fragments of Herod's triangles. Starting from the left, we have a black bitumen triangle that is a Herod's triangle cut in half on the vertical. Then there's a top 52-degree angle. Then there's one with a 64-degree bottom. And then we have a pink and white calcite alabaster that again is a Herod's triangle cut in half vertically. Remember the alternating triangle patterns from Masada? Put them in there. What I did with each of these sets of tiles is I tried to create the simplest use of the tiles. I could make it something much more elaborate, but it was, you know, the KISS theory, keep it simple, stupid. Okay, keep it simple, go for the simplest pattern there is. So we put them into this alternating triangles pattern. Okay, let's look at some of the shrunken coordinated tiles. Okay, by the shrunken tiles, I mean those ones like at Kypros, where they shrank it in order to accommodate a border. I had a bunch of them that all were coordinated. By this, I mean the small bitumen tiles, or rather the small tiles are precisely half of the medium tiles. All the medium tiles are precisely half of the large tiles. I had small ones in bitumen, I had medium in bitumen, also in limestone. In the large, I had a large Pavonazzetto imported marble, and then a big Pavonazzetto fragment. So we put that into the Q4 pattern. Could have made it more complicated, but this was the simplest one that uses these tiles. Now remember that each of these tiles is slightly smaller than normal. So the side, going down the side of it, it's slightly less than 1 Roman foot. However, I found that if I take 9 of these and put them together in a central block, add the 1/8 Roman foot trim around the outside, I'm back to exactly 3 Roman feet on a side. So here we had a 3x3 emblema using a Q4 pattern. Masada was a 4x4 emblema using a Q3 pattern. Somebody was being funny, I think. Okay, now let's take a non-standard tile. I have this kite-shaped black bitumen tile. Most of the time in Roman patterns, when you see a kite-shaped tile, that angle in the very center of it where it says 142, usually it's 90. And this has got this crazy 142-degree angle. Where does that come from? Well, let's go back to the Jericho 4-pointed star. See these four kites up out around the side, out around the edges? They are exactly this shape. So I think this is the simplest way to create a pattern here, was to use that four-pointed star pattern and insert the kite exactly where it fit. Here's three more patterns. Don't have time to do them today. The one on the left and the right, both of these are variations on Roman patterns where especially one on the right, where Herod's triangles were substituted in for usually a normal 45-degree angle. And then the one in the center is a standard Roman pattern that I think was also used at Banyas. This is the Opus Sectile building up at the top of the hill in Banyas that I think is actually one of Herod's palaces. So by understanding Herod's triangle, standard Roman tile sizes and shapes, the tiles that Salvagers preferred and the ones that they rejected, Herodian era imported marbles, Herodian variations on Roman patterns, and Herodian floor pattern generating techniques, we can begin to reconstruct the Opus Sectile patterns that were used on the Temple Mount, even though we're working only with the stones that the Salvagers rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, fell again. That was fascinating, and you might want to consider making an apology for the colorblind next time you show those.
Sorry. Actually, I think that one that I did with black and white dots and lines and whatever.
Yeah.